Hey, you're listening to the Console Corner podcast, brought to you by Console Corner. Don't forget to check out our website at consolecorner.co and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Console Pro News for all our updates for esports. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Console Corner podcast. Once again, my name is Real Blue TV, no E in blue. In today's episode, a little different, not so much talking Paladins, but we do have someone who I found from the Paladins scene, but since then has moved into competitive Call of Duty, I think for about a year and a half, 2 years now. Please welcome IHOLDSHIFT.
Oh boy, we're doing it.
Shift, how you doing today, man?
Good, man. A little bit of a slow start to the day. I'm on my second mug of coffee because I just cannot seem to get myself going. But that's the way it goes some days. It's not Monday, but it sure feels like it. So that's, just doing the things, hanging out, enjoying the scenes.
Did you know I don't drink coffee?
Do you not? Are you a tea guy or do you just not like hot drinks in general?
I mean, I'll drink tea, but normally I drink like cold tea, like iced tea.
Like iced tea?
Yeah.
I've never been a big iced tea fan. I've always been a hot tea fan. But I can't get behind like sweet tea. Like what you guys do down there in the South with sweet tea, I think is a travesty to beverages around the world.
I'm not in the South, so I don't know what they do to sweet tea.
Oh, well, why did I think you were in the South? What the hell?
I don't know.
Me neither.
It snows where I'm from, man. No, I like sweet tea. I like iced tea. I like hot tea too. But the problem is that I played basketball in college and high school, along with cross country and track. So, I was sore a lot from working out and from playing and running and stuff. So I would drink tea, like hot tea, cold tea, no matter what it was, with ginseng in it. But
that makes sense.
Yeah, because it helps you with your soreness. The ginseng.
Yeah, I've always I always been a big fan of like just like dark black tea, and then like if you wanted to do like honey with it or like add ginseng to it, you could do that and it still like tastes super good. I don't know.
Yeah, I go to the Chinese markets for some tea by my house.
Oh, a little loose leaf. You love to hear it.
Yeah. The problem
This is a podcast about tea now, by the way, if you're
Yeah, I was gonna say the problem with ginseng is that if you have to watch how much of it you consume, because if you consume too much of it in a certain amount of time, it could slow your heartbeat to the point where you can kill yourself.
Oh, good. We don't want to do that. All right.
Yeah, so that's like, I don't really like drinking tea that much because I don't want to stop my heart.
You don't want it. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to see it.
No. But speaking, you were with Paladins, but then you went to Call of Duty. I cannot, for the life of me, I was trying to do this earlier today, remember exactly like the time period of when you swapped to Call of Duty. I think it was like...
It was last fall, so not this most recent one that we just had, but the one before it. Well, it wasn't even like that was like my full swap to COD, because
that's what I'm saying. It was like 2018, right? When Black Ops 4 came out.
Yeah, it was a little bit after Black Ops 4 came out that I started to find some success with COD, because I was doing a lot of stuff with Overwatch initially. That's when I first stopped doing stuff with Paladins. The first place that I went into was doing coverage for the open division of Overwatch. And then when we got to the off season of that, because like 2018 was the last year that Overwatch had three essentially trimesters of contenders and open. It was like open, then there was a contender season, then it was an open, then it was a contender season, then it was the open qualifier for the first split of 2019's contenders. So the last open split in Overwatch was the first one that I covered. And then the off season between that open division and the following contenders division is when I started getting into COD. So it was like right around like November, December, right when the COD came out that like I started playing, but it wasn't until about January that I started casting.
Yeah, because I saw you. We'd be watching Scump stream the GP
during
battles.
the 2Ks. Yeah, during all the 2Ks.
Yeah.
My first videos that I made was
they're rocking people back then.
Yeah, they were nuts back then. It was right after like the second 2K. It was when I made my first video. And then Vegas was like late December. And that was when I first started to find success with the YouTube channel doing recap coverage of the CDL or CWL back then.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a CWL. You just said CDL, which is what we're going into in 2020. It's more structured league, sort of like how Overwatch League is. It is through Activision as well, so it'll be sort of similar, city-based. We'll get into talking about the teams and the players and the franchises in a little bit. But whenever I think of the franchises now for CDL, I always think about you and I always were like, the branding sucks for all of them. It's like you want to start out on a good foot when you start an entire league, right? And then all of a sudden it's like,
it's one of those things that when you look on like how
it was so cliche from every single roster announcement. I think there was only
there were a few like. There were a couple of so here's the best way to explain it. Like when Overwatch League first came out, season 1, new introduction of teams, all of the owners that bought into those spots like put so much energy and effort into like building their social media presence, building their content presence, and all of the logos and everything that came with it, like the brand identities was all super clean, super awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe with the exception of like the color scheme for the Florida Mayhem, everything else was dope. Like now, and now Florida Mayhem have changed that. They're now like that hot neon pink and the light like neon blue, and it looks super dope. Yeah. But for the Call of Duty League, when they started to announce what the brands were going to be, you can actually see now that we've kind of gone past the announcement phase to like a couple of weeks before the season starts, the teams that are like putting investment into like making sure like they're actually doing it correctly, their logos and brands look incredible. But like the LA Gorillas, who like have a really terrible name, super cliche, and then a logo that looks like somebody made it like on Fiverr from Bangladesh for $5. They've posted on their Twitter like 8 times, like since they announced their roster. Like they have barely posted on Twitter, and it just like it's just so confusing. Like, what is the Crunky Esports ownership that owns the LA Gorillas doing? Because they also own the LA Gladiators, and I think a lot of people would say that the LA Gladiators' social media presence is massive. But there's been none of that from the Gorillas. So there seems to be like a direct comparison between like the teams that like really, really care about like their rosters and their brands. Like they look super good and their social media presence is so super good and their content is usually super good. And then you've got the teams like Paris have barely posted anything. LA Gorillas have barely posted anything. It's just like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. I think the two, what is it? Yeah. So I think that 3 teams, like brand, team, and logo wise. First off, is the London Royal Ravens.
Really? I kind of like the Royal Ravens.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I think it should be like the London Royals or the London Ravens, right? Not the London Royal Ravens.
I think there was something to do
too much.
And again, these were all whispers behind the scene, but people were saying that like the brands, like the names, like had to be like more unique than like any other major brand that was out there. So like you couldn't do the Ravens because the Baltimore Ravens exist. Like I think that was kind of why that was that. And you couldn't do the Royals because the Kansas City Royals exist. I think that was kind of why they went Royal Ravens. But I mean, I thought their intro video was pretty dope. Some people thought it was cringe because like they had like the old guy with like the raspy voice, like talking about the story of like what the Ravens mean to London. I thought it was sick. I got like chills.
No,
like,
that one was cool. That one was cool. I think Toronto's was the funniest because that was just terrible in my opinion.
I mean, I think they're just going for the meme brand. Like if you guys missed the video, it was like super like not taking themselves seriously. But if that's the mantra you go for and you pull it off well, I think it could work. It just so happens to be that like they went for like this meme route and the roster is super underwhelming. So it's kind of like a double whammy.
Yeah, and I feel like the LA Gorillas, I think that's a terrible name. I think their logo sucks. But the other LA team, the Optic team, I think they should have just totally made a new name and everything because I know Optic was bought by Immortals, right?
Yeah.
So Immortals owns that franchise spot, right?
Correct.
I
Yeah.
think they should have. I know that a lot of people all over, both fans, players, and stuff, they want to keep that optic alive because of what it's meant to the Call of Duty pro scene and the community and stuff like that. But this is a new chapter in Call of Duty esports, and I think that that saying "quit while you're ahead." I think that's what they should have done with the optic logo and stuff. It's like Hex is not going to be there, who was a large part of the beginning of optic and all throughout its history. Plus, if the team sucks this year, I'm not saying they will, but you're kind of diminishing. Plus, it's kind of like a cheat sheet for whoever's the person who has to go to work and do branding. Like, oh, I don't have anything to do for the next 3 months because we're just gonna call it optic.
Yeah, so it's interesting because obviously with Hex leaving and the team itself splitting up and no more Gears team, they've essentially sold off all the assets besides the Call of Duty team, as far as I understand.
Well, they got rid of everything globe that was outside of the United States first, and then they started stripping apart the U.S. pieces.
Yeah, it definitely seems strange, and I think for a lot of people, myself included, it was one of those you're keeping the optic name for the clout and the infrastructure based off the brand. They didn't have to build a new Twitter account like every other CDL team had to. They didn't have to build a new YouTube channel. You still have a lot of people that support the green wall. But the interesting thing was when Optic J and all this stuff, when the selling was going on in the first place, everybody was middle fingers to Optic, right? It was pandemonium when it came to what the green wall came to expect from Hex. And then not having that, it was everyone was going at the throat of all the people that were making those decisions. But lately, if you ever take a look at the Optic Twitter threads, there's actually a lot of people going out there and now starting to defend the Optic brand again. I don't know if it's because they have been doing a different influx of media and content since the change has happened, and I think it's starting to build a little bit of a loyal fan base. But there is a little bit of an identity being built with this new Optic brand. It's just interesting because the team itself is not playing well at all right now. But they have one of the biggest rosters as far as names go on paper. So it's just interesting. We were talking about this on Off the Rip yesterday, the CMG podcast for COD. It's do they have the ability to do what 100 Thieves did last year, where they brought in all these heavy hitters, but still suffered early? And I think the big conversation for them is what do they do when the roster is not working out? Because you don't have roster mania periods like we knew over the past couple of years from COD, simply because of the things with contracts being a major thing. It's not going to be as easy to sub in and out players that aren't currently on your bench. So it's going to be interesting to see how that brand kind of develops, I guess, is my biggest point about that Optic situation at the moment.
Yeah, they have a pretty decent sized roster too. They got 7 people, I think, right? They got
They've got Chino and Gunjar on the bench, which is those are both super good additions. They very well could fill in at any moment. The biggest thing is when you think back to that 100 Thieves roster, they don't have a Crowder and they don't have a Priesta in any of that roster. Pac-Man is the coach. I think he'll do a good job, but you don't have that all-star that you can just sub in and make everything work. You also don't have an Octane. Octane was one of the most unsung heroes of 100 Thieves last year until late in the season. And I just don't know. TJ and Dashy are showing up late to practices and not seeming to care, apparently, from what I've been heard. It's just, it's very interesting. The dynamic for the Optic squad is definitely not, I think, what people expected.
Yeah, you mentioned Pac-Man's the head coach. He was the desk analyst for all of the events last year. What's your take on that? He leaves the analyst's desk and will be coaching a team now?
Yeah, I think that's what he's always wanted to do, to be completely honest. It really does feel after he got done playing, and I can't speak for him, I very well could be wrong, but just kind of looking back at what his career looked like post his quote-unquote retirement, it always felt like he wanted to still be involved with the team in one way or another. And even on some of the things from the desk last year, you could kind of tell he's still got a very big camaraderie with a number of these players that he wants to still be playing with or relating with at a more personal level. So even though I thought he was a great addition to the desk last year, I'm not at all surprised that he would get approached, especially by these 5 guys who are all super tight with Pack, to want to like have him as a coach, because he's got a good mind for the game and he's very, very diligent about like what he thinks is correct. And I think that was a lot of the reason why he is doing what he's doing here when it comes to like being a coach and not necessarily going just for staying on the desk as an analyst.
Okay. So which of the teams do you think is gonna be the best team out there? The team, the top dog, based off of what you know right now.
Atlanta FaZe, I think right now is the favorite going in. Although everyone's been saying Dallas Empire have been looking absolutely nuts, which is true. What Atlanta FaZe are currently doing with their speed and the amount of engagements that they're finding on the map is just so much more than everybody else right now. It's really not even funny. And that I think is going to be one of the biggest reasons why they stay at a high level for longer, is simply due to the fact that they have got this mentality to get aggressive and to challenge everything. So I think they're probably the top dogs going into Minnesota, specifically the launch weekend that's going to be coming up in 10 days.
Yeah, 24th.
Yeah, the 24th to the 26th. I think they're probably the favorites going in, and they've got a pretty okay schedule to do it. I'm a little bit worried about Dallas because like they have been playing super well in scrims, but they by far have the hardest schedule going into Minnesota. They play both Chicago and Atlanta.
Yeah, Chicago, that would have been my guess. Like if you just looked at rosters without seeing any of the scrims, without seeing any of the GBs or whatever they're playing and streaming, Chicago was looking like the one on paper in my eyes.
Yeah, they're doing really well, I think, just generally, but they're having struggles against Dallas and Atlanta right now, like major. Like I think those are your top 3 pretty considerably. I would throw Minnesota on the 4th spot, approaching the 3rd spot, because they've been playing super well lately, based on scrims alone, of course, which is, take it for what you will. But
yeah,
I think that out of those 4, it's like those 4 and then a considerable gap. Then you've got like your 5 through 7, and then everybody else is below that. It's pretty split right now as far as the talent that's currently in the game. Like Paris hadn't even started scrimming until yesterday, so like they're super far behind the ball.
Paris is not looking good. You spoke about Dallas. They look pretty good right now as well. I want to talk about that Illy kid because he is fine. He's a rookie now, right? Because he's finally old enough to compete at the pro level. But there's been a lot of talk about him before the CDL even started or even came up, to the public. It's like this Illy kid, he's crazy, he's insane, and he just can't play because he's not 18 yet or whatever, yada, yada, yada. Do you see what everyone else sees in him, or?
Oh, absolutely. The he's a nutter. I mean, he's super good. He's got the same shades that like Simp did, where the guy is an absolute glitch before he turns 18. He's going to get inserted right into a pro league scenario and still be insane. The biggest worry that I had for players like Illy, like Shotzi, again, who's coming in as, just turned 18. Of course, he had pro experience playing in Halo. But also with players like Simp, Abizi, the younger players that just recently found their way into the Pro League, was when the initial Call of Duty League schedule was announced, it was 24 weekends with tons of travel. And my biggest worry is, you got to keep in mind that these kids, they haven't gone to college. They haven't been away from home. They've been only playing video games, seriously. I mean, of course, high school, they obviously, I'm sure, focused on their studies at some point in time, but they don't have that same kind of cultured separation that the normal 18-year-old would, whether even if you just go to a community college where you're still commuting in. It's just putting yourself in an environment that is foreign to you. You don't have that because they go to high school, they come home, they play on their setup, and now all of a sudden, you're a pro. And with 24 weekends that were initially announced, with a ton of travel internationally, where you're not just going to be able to practice. Okay, we're flying to Columbus, Ohio. We're playing for the weekend. We fly back like it was last year. Now it's you practice for a couple of days. You're traveling on Wednesday. You're setting up on Thursday. You're playing Friday and Saturday, and then you're flying home on Sunday. Like, you don't have that same kind of routine. And I feared that like the more immature players, not saying that like personally they're immature, but like not being developed as well, like through like a collegiate scenario where like you're home on your, like you have your own spot, you have your own responsibilities.
Yeah.
Can you take care of yourself? That was kind of a concern, but fortunately, the system, the format has just recently changed. So there will not be the 24 weekends. There's only 15 total weekends if you include the All-Star event and finals. And that's going to make things a lot easier on them. So my only concerns for players like Illy and Shotzi from like Dallas, for instance, were that they might not be able to handle the culture shock of going from just playing at your home setup to having to travel all the time. That has kind of been eliminated. And I think players like Illy, Shotzi are going to be absolutely stupid when it comes to the regular season.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. Being new to this foreign environment, we talked about that on my last podcast with Vex30 and Raukyan from Paladins, because they were both kind of sharing their stories about their first LAN, because this most recent Paladins LAN was Raukyan's first time being there. But he was in the starting rotation of the team that he went with, unlike Vex, who went to like 3 LANs before he was even a starter on a team, So going to your first LAN event or you're traveling for the first time as a sub is kind of easier because it's a lot less pressure for you than going as a player who's going to be starting and stuff like that. But it was also like, it's not just that you're going to LAN for the first time and you're playing, but you're going to see all these people for like Illy and stuff. He's going to see people that he's looked up to or that he's watched play Call of Duty for years. He's going to meet, the casters, the analysts, he's going to meet streamers, personalities, other celebrities, so it's like all of that is kind of like the wow factor being in that environment too. And so going as a sub, when we were talking last week, was like, it's kind of easier because you just have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about playing as well, compared to the people who do have to play. So that foreign environment is a lot to take on for your first time. For the people, you do it over and over and over again. You get used to it. This, that, how, oh, I need this much rest. I need to do this. I need to do that. But yeah, I see where you're coming from. 15 weeks is a lot easier to handle than 24, like you said. So that'll be a lot easier. Who's some of the older guys that you think could still put in a lot of work in the new format that is the CDL?
Clayster, I think, is going to have a great year this year again. I think he's due for 2 solid years in a row. Him and Crimsex have looked great together as the AR duo for the Dallas Empire. Very excited for them, just to see if they're able to kind of, it's the dynamic that Dallas team has where you're taking a risk on 2 unproven players that have never played professionally at this level in Call of Duty, have a storied background, with Illy coming out of, the S&D superstar kind of background with a great stream setup as well, being that young up-and-comer. And then you've got Shotzi, the guy that was, Halo tested and true, and then moving over to Call of Duty this last year. He's been really, really impressive. So it's kind of hard, I think, for like the management, the NV team that owns the Dallas Empire. If you're looking at Hastro in specific, he's looking at this saying, we're going to take a risk on some of these guys, but we've got the veteranship of Crimsix and Clayster, 2 of the oldest, most storied, most veteran players in Call of Duty's history that can be there to help lead them. And then you've got, again, another kid that's absolutely stupid on the map. Huke has been one of the biggest glitches in Call of Duty, ever, since he's been able to turn 18. So, he's got a couple of years of experience under his belt now as well. He can kind of help Ilya and Shotzi when it comes to, being able to relate with them. But then you also got the leadership that Clayster and Crimsix. It's just, the dynamic is just so good with this Dallas Empire squad. I really feel like the energy that those three, Shotzi, Hugh, and Illy, will bring, will help kind of keep Clayster and Crimsix reinvigorated and dedicated all the way through. So I'm very excited to see what those two old dogs are able to do with Dallas. But then you also take a look at the Seattle Surge, who have Karma, Enable, Octane, Slacked, and Apathy, the oldest roster by average in the CDL. I mean, those are a bunch of dads.
Like, I was gonna mention that team to you. I was gonna mention that team when you were talking about veteran players. I was gonna be like, well, Seattle, that's an entire veteran roster there. It's a bunch of white-haired old men.
I think their average age is like near 25, where like the average age of like Atlanta is like 19. Like it's crazy. Like they're by far the oldest team in the league.
What happens if they win the championship, man?
Man, I think it speaks to just veteranship might pay off.
They're gonna need walkers to get off the stage after carrying each other that hard. But okay, so way too early, or it's not way too early anymore. It's kind of like the preseason, I guess, with only 10 days until the first event officially. Who is your end of the year champion right now? I guess it is kind of way too early prediction.
Atlanta, I think, is probably my top dog. It's not just because of the roster, but it's the support staff that they have behind them as well. You've got Crowder as the coach, and he's already proven himself what he's able to do from what he was able to do with the 100 Thieves after he went from being a player during the PLQ to kind of backing away and taking the coaching role. And you've got Easy Mac, who's the analyst, who is a genius when it comes to break down statistics and making them relatable. I think the support staff there is insane. You also have RJ. Again, a lot of familiarity between RJ and Crowder with their time with FaZe previously. I think that support staff is nuts. But more importantly, you also have two really good bench players in Journey, who previously played with the Heretics from Spain, who was probably, I would say, the all-star from that Heretics team. And you've also got Tom Gravity, who is another up-and-coming player that has proven himself when he was on FaZe Clan Black last year. And was able to kind of work his way through the open brackets. Those two will actually be playing with each other on the FaZe Academy team, which is also looking really good when it comes to the path to pro, the Challengers division. So I think all the pieces are in place for a team like Atlanta to keep consistency throughout the entirety of the year. And I just love what they have in the back end. I think that Crowder as a head coach is going to bring a lot of expertise to this squad that is, again, a lot of very young players that are on their sophomore syndrome. Sip and Celium were rookies last year. Abizi's only going into his third year. Major Maniac and Priesta, again, not super veteran, but you're bringing in a lot of good support staff to use and mold that young talent into something special. I think they're probably my favorites right now, although it is a small margin between like them and Dallas. I think they're by far, at least going into the first event, the best two teams in the league.
Okay, so Shift going for the Atlanta FaZe. So couple players I want your opinion on. How difficult was it for some of these players on these teams? The teams are mainly NA and EU. What is there? Only 2 EU teams, right? London and Paris?
Yeah, London and Paris.
And the rest are NA. Mainly all of them are in America except for Toronto. So, yeah, Toronto is the only one outside of the US, besides London and Paris. But how difficult was it for some of these players that are not from these countries to get on these teams? So you talked about Journey from Heretics last year. I know I've watched a bunch of Heretics matches with you last year as well. So how big of a step forward is that for someone like Journey to be able to make a roster in Atlanta on an NA team coming all the way from Spain, I think it is, right?
Yeah, from Spain. It's massive. Here's the deal. Journey just got into the States like a couple of days ago.
Yeah, because there's a ton of NA players that didn't even make these teams.
Right, absolutely. I think it speaks a lot to what Journey was able to show throughout his time last year. Just as a consistent AR player, specifically with Heretics, who had the kind of really surprising run. They had a really good run at Vegas. They did incredible at PLQ. They had a really good start to the regular season last year in the CWL. And then they had a couple of slips here and there. They made a couple of weird roster changes, but Journey was always the constant factor. So for players like him, and then you also take a look at the Australian boys that also made the trip across, and they'll be playing for the Paris team. That was another situation, though, trying to get these international players that don't traditionally have just visas in their back pocket like a lot of the UK kids do. It was a little bit of a stretch. Like, again, with Journey only showing up to the States a couple of days ago, Lucas Shocks and Dens for Paris, who a lot of people were thinking are going to be a possible starting 3 for that Paris roster.
Yeah, and they've got Kismet and Phantoms, I think, the other 2 starters, and they're from America.
Right.
And then
they're all practicing in the States. They're not sitting in Paris and playing. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. But just looking at it, it's like the Paris team, and they have one French person. That's
Brezzy.
Yeah, Brezzy, and he's a sub. And then I think Zed is from the UK, right?
He's from the UK. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. There's another UK player that is playing for Dallas as a sub, Tommy.
Yeah, Tommy he's not going to be there as, I think, the go-to 6th guy. Tish will be that guy, I think.
Yeah.
Tommy's mostly there as a content creator and another influential mind. Again, another reason why I like that Dallas team so much. But I wouldn't be expecting to see him be that 6th man. I think they'd probably use Tish over Tommy. I don't know if that'll actually be the case or not, but that's kind of what my expectation would be, after Tommy kind of left after London last year and took a back seat, talking about how he's been having to deal with some mental things and kind of making sure that he's in a stable spot. It seems like I watch his stream pretty regularly. It seems like he's doing much better and he's in a pretty solid spot, but I just don't think he's expecting to be that 6th man. Like you would see, like, for instance, with Chicago, General is the 6th man there, and that's what you're going to expect to see him be, is like the sub. It kind of feels like Tommy is there as kind of another influential mind and another guy that can help out behind the scenes. But no, I think, going to your original point, when it comes to trying to see these international players, a lot of people, I think, were really upset that you didn't have the Heretics getting a CDL spot this upcoming year. But with 3 of those 5 players from Heretics on rosters, at least in some fashion, with the CDL, I think this is probably the best thing that likely could have happened to Heretics, because you go into expansion next year and you figured you get a spot, but now 3 of your Spanish players are building a lot of experience with an international roster. They're learning English more. They're learning the dynamic of travel. They're getting a lot of built-up experience where they might not have had that same opportunity if it was just the Heretics roster coming in as what would have been 5 Spanish players playing for whatever Spain city they orientated with. But it's tough. I think the overall standpoint for these international players, it's been tough to get them to the States and to get them set up. But it looks like so far everybody is now here and ready to go. So hopefully it's all moving forward from here on out.
Yeah, you were talking about language barriers. That's a huge thing in esports that a lot of people
massive in esports.
They don't seem like that's not the first thing people think of. Going back to, of course, Paladins, because I'm so deeply rooted into it. And you probably know most of these players too. The Space Station Gaming Squad this year. They had
the Brazilian squad that was kind of mixed matched, right?
They had Sadak. They picked up Sadak going into 2019, and it was kind of tough for them at first because Sadak is not Brazilian, so he didn't speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
With the other 4 members of the team. He was on Nocturnes Gaming, if you remember, when you casted.
Sure do.
At HRX, he was with Fuzzy Logic and them, and Hecate. So he spoke Spanish, but he didn't speak Portuguese. So he had to learn Portuguese over the course of the season, and towards the end, it started to click. They started to communicate a lot better, and they started to do much better going into the World Championship bracket. Unfortunately, they lost in the first round, but
it's the way it goes sometimes.
It wasn't a communication problem that time. So 2 more things. I want to talk about some of these teams real quick. London. We haven't really talked a lot about that roster. How do you feel about Wuskin, Scraps, Dylan, Jerd, and Rated being able to play together on the team in London?
I think the best thing that this London team did was give the combined European might something to root for. I think they did a brilliant job picking up, obviously, the best players in EU, flat out, I think, through and through. But more importantly, the fact that they've got Shawnee and Madcat that are not just on the bench, but are also leading up one of the best EU Path to Pro squads right now. They're building that constant experience. Wuskin, Scraps, Dylan, all three of those players, nuts. Dylan and Scraps specifically are looking at kind of to lead the charge after what they were able to do during Black Ops 4. Wuskin is an extremely good player. Scraps and Wuskin get a chance. The twins get to play together again for the first time in a long time.
Yeah,
that's
Bradley
super exciting to see. Yeah. And then Jerd has always been a consistent player, and Rated has always been a really solid AR player. So I think they've done most things correct. I think talent-wise, they didn't build the best roster as far as like available options, but I think they did the best job of kind of building their brand behind a team that is going to provide a massive fan base. And I've got them sitting right around the 6th, 7th spot, like right there with like Florida Mutineers. I think that the roster is really good. I think that they can hang with every single one of the teams that are above them. I think they could surprise here and there, but if you match them up against Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas routinely, I don't think they'll be able to take the majority of games just simply due to how those other squads have looked. But this team is getting better faster, so it is exciting. And you also got Joe kind of behind the scenes as the head coach. Again, he got a lot of flack, I think, near the end of his playing career, but he's a brilliant mind for the game. And I'm excited to see what he's able to do as head coach for the London Royal Ravens.
Okay, and last one. This is my favorite one. I don't know if you're going to enjoy it. Sensor. Sixth man and comeback player of the year. Do you see it happening?
No. New York did everything correct with the exception of their bench, I think.
With Sensor and Happy.
I mean, Happy was the sub, I want to say, for Splice last year. But he kind of coached. The thing is, like, we haven't seen Happy play since the PLQ, where he played with a group called the Orlando Reapers.
Yeah.
They had a lot of expectations because Miracles was on that team, I think, too. And they finished, like, top 64. Like, they got smoked. And Sensor, I don't think is going to see any playing time. My biggest worry about that New York Subliners roster is if they start getting mad at each other, like, will they just implode? Like, temp and accuracy had problems last year on Splice, and it's less than a year, and now they're on the same roster again. The only real good news about this team is that Revan, who's the head coach, it looks like he handpicked the 5 players that he wants for a team, and Zuma and Attach have looked nasty on this game. It just comes down to, will the egos get them mixed up, and if things do go haywire, how do you deal with it? Because you have nobody on the bench that you're comfortable putting in. They went the route of content creators and friends to kind of be the back end of their team. And I just don't think the depth is there for them to make swaps. Like, every other team that's out there has the ability to at least sub in one more player to, if things aren't going well, or if someone needs a break, or if someone's sick, that they can just put them in and they'll feel okay, if not more, just as comfortable as they would if they're starting 5. New York is the only team that does not have that.
Yeah, I feel like if I actually got to do my dream of doing like the Pardon the Interruption, but for esports, I feel like Sensor would be the equivalent to Antonio Brown stories.
Probably.
Where it comes up in every episode, but we just don't want to talk about them.
Yeah, it's I mean, like, I don't know. I don't really have a solid opinion on it besides the fact that I just don't see him ever playing, and it feels like a kind of a wasted spot, honestly, when it comes down to their, again, like, depth is going to be huge. They're fortunate that they stepped away from the 24-week period. Like, honestly, if it was 24 weeks of that team playing together, just those core 5, they would have absolutely blown up at some point in time. But now that it's only 15, maybe there's some hope that they won't be mad at each other and get at each other's throats. But I'm a little bit cautiously optimistic about that roster because I like what it has to offer on paper. I like Revan and JP Krez behind the helm, but if they blow up, they have no other angle. It's a one-trick pony for that squad.
Okay, so Atlanta's your top team. Who's your underdog team right now? The team that not a lot of people are thinking can make any sort of big moves, but they could have the potential or the most potential amongst some of the bottom-tiered teams.
I think the biggest dark horse right now that no one's really talking about, although they are people are starting to talk about them now. I think mostly because nobody's talking about them. So it's like, wait, why is nobody talking about this team? It's Minnesota. Again, I have them in my top 5 for sure. But as far as like underdog teams that could really do something, I think Florida has the opportunity to potentially make a couple of moves. I think the roster is good. I think they're getting better. But again, I have them like in that 6-7 spot. I think the easiest pick though, as far as a team that is not doing well now that could do very well, I think is the Optic Gaming LA team. If they were to find that mystery powder, that fairy dust, here's the secret sauce that we need to be successful, I think they have the biggest potential as far as a ceiling goes. It just sucks because right now they're kind of living in the basement and not sitting on the 4th floor of their mansion like they probably should be.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Kenny. And like you said, Florida, I'm a big fan of Pristini as well. So hopefully those guys can help their teams make some big moves going into the season. There is a couple events coming up. Like you said, the launch weekend is in Minnesota. That's in 10 days, January 24th to the 26th. And then I don't think we'll see them again until February 22nd for Atlanta, right?
There is the London homestand that's happening on the 8th. But the way that the format will work is that you only get 8 teams a weekend. So you're not going to see all the teams again until championships, technically. But the London weekend will be the second weekend up, and that's February 8th.
Awesome. Then they go to LA, Toronto, Dallas, Chicago, Florida, and Seattle, all the way up until April 18th, I think, is the Seattle Open. But
I think that's right.
Let's shift gears here and talk a little bit about the CCL, the College COD League. So, I believe it was Midwest, right? The other day, 2 days ago, you guys finished the Midwest kickoff tournament.
It was just an open kickoff tournament for all the teams that were signed up. It wasn't necessarily just the Midwest division. But yeah, it was our Modern Warfare kind of season kickoff. It doesn't have any implications for the regular season. It was just kind of like an intro to the teams, the ones that wanted to sign up. We had 29 of the teams sign up. We have 72 teams, though, for the regular season. I, of course, anticipate that 72 will probably not be fully realized. When we get all the way into it, we usually get a couple of teams that get smoked the first couple of weeks and then back out and don't play anymore. But it's still a huge upgrade from where we were last year. Even more from the year previous, where I think it was just like 8 teams that were barely even affiliated with universities in season 0. Last year, it was 32. So going from 8 to 32 to 72 has been pretty insane here for the CCL.
Yeah, I was watching some of those matches too. Concord Maroons ended up winning that tournament. I wanted Raging Cajuns to win because that name is awesome.
And the University of Louisiana Lafayette.
Yeah, and also they reverse swept when I tuned in. Mm-hmm. And also, whenever I hear Raging Cajun, it always reminds me of, I forgot his exact name, but he was the campaign manager for Bill Clinton. But he was from Louisiana, so they called him the Raging Cajun. So I wanted them to win. Yeah, that reverse sweep was pretty nice. So.
Yeah, that Georgia Southern team's no joke either. That's the team they got the reverse sweep against. And the interesting thing about that ULL team, the Raging Cajuns, is that they have had very little practice with each other so far. So the fact that they were able to do as well as they did was super encouraging, I think, for those guys in specific. Very excited to see what that ULL team is going to be able to offer as we get into the regular season when they get more practice underneath their belts. Because I think they're going to be a really solid squad moving forward. It just comes down to, are they able to get things going and get that practice that they need to be a contender early? I think obviously they're able to do that. It just comes down to, I know a lot of those guys are also playing in the Path to Pro, so kind of splitting their time between college, their CCL team, and their Path to Pro squad could be a little bit overwhelming, I think, at times.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. I was going to ask you the other day if the University of Lafayette had a team, because I'm actually committing there next year, so I was going to be able to play for them. But are there any other CCL teams that you think should be mentioned, top teams going into this year for you? You have the Midwest, the Northeast, the Southeast, and the West divisions, right?
Yes, Southeast, Northeast, West, Midwest. Yeah. The West Division is by far the easiest one out there. It is not competitive. You've got Arizona State, which looks pretty good out there.
Wait,
Texas A&M Maroon.
wait, 1 second. When you said 32, how many teams do you have this year?
72.
So it's 72 amongst those four?
Yes, split between those four.
Okay. Is it all like even? It's the same number in each, or?
Yeah, 18 squads in each.
Okay, so West Division, like you were saying.
Looking like a cakewalk, just flat out. Arizona State looks good. They look okay. Texas A&M Maroon is their number one team. They've got 2 squads. They have a lot of really good players. Grand Canyon looks pretty decent as well when it comes out to the West. And then like UT Dallas and Utah are also in the conversation. But comparing like the top teams in the West to every other division, it's like not even close. The Midwest division, Butler looked good last year. They should be good this year, but you also got the Concord Maroon team. That's their number one squad. They've won the last 3 CCL tournaments that we've put on. The Illini Orange squad out of the University of Illinois looks really good. Purdue looks really good. I mean, that is a monster hitting division. The Northeast is just like that as well. Humber's your reigning champion. Maryland looks good. The Penn State squads look good. Rutgers looks good. And then the Southeast, Mississippi State played really well in their bracket coming out, which was kind of a surprise. But you also got Georgia Southern, who played well. Full Sail, that looked really good. Florida State, that looks really good. Alabama, that looks really good. There's a lot. That's the thing is like, last year, there were like 5 teams that it's like, all right, these guys are the best 5 teams in the CCL. And there are a couple of teams that, are close, but there's still a pretty big gap. This year, there are like 12 teams that are absolutely insane. That like, honestly, if they were to like take some of their best players, get a handful of practices of weeks, like going into a Path to Pro event, they could finish top 32, if not higher. There are some squads out there this year that are absolutely nuts, and it's going to be a really fun year of the CCL.
So let's treat this as if it's like the college football or college basketball going into the pros. Okay.
Boy,
are there any players out there in the CCL among these top teams that you think could potentially, depending on how well their season goes this year, could make the jump to the pro league next year?
To the pro league, probably not. The weird thing about it is, and this could be a conversation that we hold on to 4 or 5 hours if we wanted to, and we'll try not to do that here. The whole mantra of like amateur sports to professional sports runs through the system of college, right? For football, for basketball, everything runs through college, with the exception of like your LeBron James that gets scouted right out of high school. Professional esports athletes are more in tune to what LeBron James did than what, like, for instance, Burrow's going to do this upcoming year as soon as he goes to the draft and goes number 1 to Cincinnati, right?
5,500 yards and 60 touchdowns,
dude. The kid's nuts.
He's from Ohio.
Like, you do not have that same path. Like, for the kids that are in college that are good now, that are like in some of these squads that are super good, I'm not saying that they're not good enough to be at the pro level. They could be, but like their regimen of practice is different than like what Illy just went through, where he was in high school playing until 4:00 in the morning and then would go to high school and then come home and do the same thing and then immediately get picked up onto a pro team.
Yeah.
Like, going pro as an esports player is more like what LeBron James did as a high school basketball player going to the NBA than what you see going through college.
You just gave a lot of high school kids a lot of hope.
Stay in school. Get your degrees. It's more important, I promise.
Stay up till 4 a.m. That's what Shift told me to do. It's a school night. Right? Nope, Shift told me otherwise.
But I think, like, again, it's just the split. Like, a lot of these kids that are in the collegiate Call of Duty league, they're good at the game. To be honest, most of them are very good at the game, but their focus is on getting a degree, not necessarily going pro in the game that they're playing.
Yeah.
Especially the ones that are going to major universities. The guys that are going
you got
to
a lot of
University
those.
Illinois. Yeah, like the ones that I just mentioned, like those are not like your community colleges.
Yeah,
like,
that's
just getting a degree here. Like, these are kids that are going to full-time universities and putting on full-time hours and that are going for major degrees. And I think that difference and just the initial mentality of an esports player in college that, hey, I am literally a collegiate, scholastic athlete, if you want to call it that. Like, college is coming first for these kids.
Yeah.
Um,
Student athletes, man. Student comes first.
Yeah, the student comes first for sure. But again, like, the thing is, like, there are players out there. Like, I think if they were to quit going to college and were to like just work a part-time job and were to like put in the hours that some of these path to pro teams are currently doing, I think you could find 5-10 players that if they were to match up and mix well together, they could be, top 16 path to pro squads, and they very well could get the notoriety of maybe going pro. But that system just isn't there yet, right? I mean, like, we haven't even talked about the challenger system for Call of Duty, and again, that's another conversation that could last a long time. But there is not like a set structure of, you are now a semi-pro with the ability to go pro potentially in the future. Like, that system is not necessarily realized yet. So I think it'd be hard for me to pick an individual saying that, yes, this kid right now playing up against other student athletes will be able to go pro. Like, it's not like you have the comparison of like Joe Burrow putting up bigger numbers than Trevor Lawrence yesterday. Like, okay, this guy's clearly doing it, at the highest level and is ready to go pro. It's a little bit too hard to make that comparison and to like pick out a special player that would be able to instantly find like weight to throw around in a boxing rink that is currently the amateur scene of Call of Duty.
All right, so there's a lot of big schools that you mentioned that are in the CCL this year too. Mainly when you look at all these esports that have these college institutions competing in them, it's always like these. I don't know how to describe them. They're not. Some of them are small, but the ones that aren't really like, big, like Division I, like Ohio State, Rutgers. You didn't list Ohio State, but Rutgers, Arizona State, Illinois, some of the ones you mentioned that are in the CCL. So to have those big schools in the league itself is pretty monumental, in my opinion, because
it absolutely is. The biggest concern, when it comes to dealing with major D1 schools is the fact that you have to go through a lot of red tape to become a varsity program at those universities. Like, that's just from like, not from our standpoint as a CCL, like from the school esports, the kids that want to play with their school name attached to them as an esports department or an esports club. It's very difficult to make that happen. Even more difficult to become a varsity program. Which again, like that, the term varsity is usually mostly reference to like the difference between varsity and JV in high school. But like, being a varsity program means that you have the official sanctions and copyrights of the school itself, and that you are an official school program. And that has been the hardest thing with D1 schools because they just don't see the value in esports programs yet. And, again, over the last couple of years, you've got like your Robert Morris's, you've got your D2, D3 schools that like, hey, the D1 schools don't want to hit esports and video games. We can use that as a way to like boost our admissions and enrollment. And like kind of hit a niche. So like, you've got a handful of smaller schools that are like, yeah, we're a varsity program. Our school is sanctioning this because they want to push the esports division, as a major, appeal factor for a lot of kids that are coming out of high school and stuff like that. So like, you've got like St. Clair, you've got a couple of smaller colleges that are kind of using their varsity program. RIT, for instance, is like that. But for the more major universities that are D1 schools, it becomes a lot more difficult for the players themselves to get approval from the school to play in the CCL, let alone to use the university name. Last year we had 4 different squads that we had to list as CCL, and then like a gemstone. We had CCL Onyx, we had CCL Jade, stuff like that. Because it was the schools would not allow them to use their name. Florida State was one of those schools. We couldn't call them Florida State on stream. Because they did not have the approval of the school to use their official trademarks. So those are still some of the red tape and obstacles that some of these players have to deal with when it comes to being at a major university and also wanting to play.
Yeah, it's a lot of hassle, but a lot of schools are starting to jump on board the esports train here as of lately. Let's talk about Path to Pro. They did change it. I guess they kind of added it. There was really no official Path to Pro previous, would you say, or?
Yeah, so I mean, the system has changed dramatically, right? Because if you followed along even remotely to the Call of Duty scene in the last handful of years, there was a regular season for the pros. Then there was usually some way that open teams or amateur teams had a way to get into the pro league. Last year, it was a giant Vegas Open where there were a couple of teams that were safe from the open bracket simply because of what kind of pro points they had. And that's a whole nother, again, system that if you're not familiar with it, it's too much to break down now. But there was an opportunity if you did well at the Vegas Open last year as an amateur open team, you would go to the pro league qualifier. And then if depending on how you played there, you were in the pro league. There was a way to get into the pro league last year. And then after that point, there were all of these open events that happened where the pro teams would play in their own individual isolated bracket for just essentially a prize pool of money. But then behind that, there was also an open bracket that was completely open enrollment, as many teams as wanted to sign up. And that was its own kind of system and tournament. It was, again, they were all standalone tournaments. There's not like a league system for amateur teams that wanted to compete in Call of Duty. Going into this next year, you have essentially the same kind of situation where the pro league is, again, just the pro league. They only play against each other. There's no way, though, this year for open teams to get into the pro league, obviously, because it's city-based franchising. So for the challengers division coming into this next year, it's a little bit more of a regular thing because you've got a major tournament that'll be happening at Minnesota for the challengers division. Which of course is for $250,000, a major prize pool that'll be split up between the top, I think 32 teams, maybe top 16, I can't remember. But then there will be events that happen every single weekend of these homestand events that the CDL teams will be at. That is already better than what the Call of Duty has ever seen. The fact that there will be events happening every weekend that a CDL event is happening is massive. The only thing as far as like not having a structured system is the fact that these CDL homestand weekends are only going to be for 32 to 64 teams and only for at least $10,000, which will likely mean that it'll only be for $10,000. So there's, again, no league structure, no official like consistent structure where, you know, you're Aspire Esports and you have these 5 players. They will be playing on a regular, consistent basis. That is not necessarily a guarantee. But at least for now, going into it, the Challengers division will have the ability, if you are a Challengers player or an amateur player, you have the ability and opportunity to play much more regularly than ever before, which is exciting.
Is there any path to pro teams out there you're keeping an eye on? Or
oh my goodness, absolutely. There, so
because when I think of this situation, I think of like Overwatch League Season 1, and then kind of like in the contenders was Runaways, and now Runaways is in the Overwatch League, and they did very team, well at the beginning. Yeah, the Vancouver squad.
Yeah, the Vancouver Titans team. Yeah, and that's, I think, the interesting thing going into this next year. Like, again, from Season 1 to Season 2 of the Overwatch League, you added in a bunch more, franchise spots. 8. And the Vancouver Titans just said, what's the best contenders team right now in Overwatch? And it was at that point in time the Runaway squad, like you mentioned, from Korea. So what do? They just sign that entire roster and they become the Vancouver Titans. Now, Runaway still exists, but they existed just in the Korean contenders circuit with a different roster, obviously, now than what they had after they made that miraculous run where they didn't like lose a tournament for like 2.5 years straight.
Dude, they have the sickest jerseys too.
Yeah, dude, that branding is actually super slick.
That
I really like it a lot.
Pink tracer thing. Yeah, plus, they just wore crew neck sweatshirts. Like, I was telling someone, man, esports players, they got all these jerseys with their hoodies underneath. Just make your jerseys hoodies or sweatshirts. Just make it something comfortable, man. If they're gonna do that anyways,
Yeah, the Runaway brand is super cool. But it's going to be interesting this next year because for the Call of Duty Challenger scene, there's $1 million total in the prize pool for official events that'll be happening. That much we got information on. So I'm hoping that will lead to some of these teams that we're about to talk about sticking together, because one of the biggest problems that the Call of Duty amateur scene has had in previous years, because of the fact that it's individual, isolated, open events, is if we don't play well, we're just going to make wild roster changes.
Yeah.
And usually the team changed organization brand every single week. Like that was the other, or every single event at least. I'm hoping that with the notion that there will be $1 million total in prize pool, plus the fact that, hey, there will be expansion teams next year. I'm hoping that some of these Path to Pro squads will stick together. Now, most specifically, some of these squads that I'm about to talk about, they're probably currently better than half of the CDL.
Ooh.
Like, flat out. Like,
I don't know. I don't know about that New York team, man. They're baller.
I don't know, dude. This UIU team, Pentagram, Infamous, M. Ruiz, Zyril, Rex, the Parasites team with Spacey, Prolute, Pharaoh, and Spart. Like, both of those squads, like the top two currently in NA based on their pro points, they have been playing up against teams like Chicago, Dallas, Atlanta. Like, they don't even bother playing up against other amateur teams, let alone the bottom of the CDL teams. Like, they'll scrim against any pro team they have the opportunity to, but like, hearing and talking to the Atlanta and Dallas guys, like, if both of those teams were to stick together throughout the entirety of the year, both of those squads immediately get picked up next year.
What squads again?
As a full 5-man
UIU
roster.
and who?
UIU and the Parasites team. Probably the same conversation for like Surge Academy's squad, the Seattle Academy team. They're doing very, very well. E United picked up a team that they're doing very, very well. Aspire Esports is doing very, very well. Really, any of the top 5 NA teams could instantly be put into the CDL and probably do better than at least the bottom 3, if not most of the squads that are out there. Same conversation for, like, I would say the top 3 EU teams. Team War, the Royal Ravens Academy squad, and Singularity all have a lot of players that played at World Championships, if not in the Pro League last year, and are doing extremely well. Like, there are probably, I would say, 7 to 8 teams right now that could be instantly picked up into a Pro League squad and compete, no problem.
Biggest snubs for players that didn't get signed to CDL rosters.
Oh, individual players?
Yeah, biggest snubs.
Exotic, in my mind. Played for Evil Geniuses last year. I thought he played extremely well at World Championships. I thought he played well throughout the entirety of the year, actually. But definitely at World Championships, he played extremely well. I'm absolutely mind blown that not only is he not on a roster, but he's not on a starting roster. Royalty, another player that I think had a very good end of the year that, once again, didn't really get much notoriety whatsoever when it came down to what he was able to do at the end of the year. And I don't know. I'm just a little bit confused on why he's not in there. And Zaptius, another player. Zaptius and Royalty together, they were the SMG duo to finish out the year, and they looked really, really good. Both of those individual players are going to do very well in the Path to Pro. Zap is playing on the FaZe Academy team. Exotic is playing on the E United team. So they'll do very well, I think, there. But I'm still mind blown that they're not in the Pro League.
All right. A lot of information for all you COD heads out there, but Shift pretty much killed it, man. If Atlanta doesn't win, by the way, I am just going to...
Put me on blast, dude. I think they'll do well. They'll be a top 3 team at the end of the year, at least.
Don't worry. We'll have you on again midway through the season. Okay, so you can, if you need to redeem yourself, you can.
Perfect.
You can change it up during that time. But I'm super excited for the Call of Duty League 2020. City-based franchises, first time ever for them. I would say it's worked for Overwatch League. I know Season 1 was kind of rough for them, especially at the end. I think they were broke. Pretty much. That's why I think their original plan was only to let 4 new teams into the league. 4 new franchises.
I mean, all that China money came through, and they're like, yeah, we'll pay $60 million for a spot, and they said, okay.
Yeah, they paid like double or triple for the franchise fee, and I was just like, wow, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts.
Well, they spent that at the end of the first season, they had their All-Star weekend or whatever in the Barclays Center. It cost them 20-something million, 22 million to rent the arena without even like staffing it.
That's wild.
Yeah, I think that's what Golden Boy told me. Around 20, 22. Without security, without staffing it, without even turning the lights on, I think. So.
That's wild, actually. What the?
Yeah, so, hey, if a Chinese team is going to franchise for 60 mil, That's 3 years of Barclays, I guess, right?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens, I think, with both the Overwatch League going into their third season and even with the CDL going into their first. I mean, we're going to see, if the travel will even be plausible for the Overwatch League. Someone had put out that, like, the London team is going to travel 3 times further than the Los Angeles Lakers did last year.
Well,
which is nuts.
What's interesting is that not Call of Duty, but Overwatch Season 1, they all played in LA. And they all lived in
with
LA.
with a couple of exceptions. You had the individual one homestand per split, right?
That was Season 2.
Oh yeah, Season 2. Okay, I
forgot. So Season 1, everyone lived and played in LA. And then Season 2, they did a homestand each week in each team's city.
Yeah, once per stage, yeah.
I think Season 3 is when they're going to start traveling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But Call of Duty is not doing it all in one place at their first season. It's kind of like Overwatch. And I said this when Overwatch Season 1 was halfway through. I said, this league is going to set the tone and set the bar for future esports, because now CDL doesn't have to do what Overwatch did in Season 1. They don't all have to play in the same city. They're doing it the same way that Overwatch did it in Season 2, where, each weekend they're in a different. You got to
remember, though, that the CWL last year was kind of like the test run format for the CDL. Like, everybody knew the CDL was going to be happening, like, this time last year, that the CDL would be a thing come 2020.
Yeah.
So last year was like, everyone played in Columbus, Ohio.
Yep.
It was Division A would play one week, Division B would play the next, and that was 16 teams. So, like, that was kind of like the Season 1 of Overwatch League, like, if you were to, like, put parallels between it. So this is kind of like the second season of, like, if it was still labeled the CWL instead of the CDL, this would be Season 2, essentially, with, the exception that there's city-based franchising. So it's kind of like they already got their test run out of the way in certain ways, but it's also going to be brand new in a lot of different ways, because you are doing homestands immediately out the gate with city-based franchises, where Activision Blizzard, who essentially ran everything last year alongside MLG, which is kind of like a branch off the tree, which is Activision Blizzard. Now it's like, okay, we have to trust all these owners and organizations to do it right, with only a little bit of oversight. So it's going to be interesting, to say the least, for sure.
All right, so here is my question. Will we see Call of Duty on ESPN?
No.
We saw Overwatch on there.
It's too violent. It's nothing to do with
I'm not talking ABC. I'm not talking ABC on Saturday like Overwatch was. I'm talking.
No, it's still too violent. Period. I know. I'm telling you, this is a totally different conversation point, but Rocket League is going to be the first esport to become mainstream. It is easy, it's familiar, and it's not violent. 3v3 car soccer, I get it.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
You don't have to explain it to anybody.
Kids would super love that too.
Yeah. Call of Duty you won't see on a mainstream network. It's too violent of a video game. Period. As much as that is a meme to say, and I hate to hear it come out of my mouth, it's just the fact.
Well, I am trying to open up a esports bar and grill, so if you want to join in on that, we can play all the Call of Duty matches there.
Let me know. I'm there.
Dude, you can do like open mic casting.
Let's do it, dude. I'm all about that.
You can sit on a bar stool on a stage with a mic in your hand and just cast it like drunk casting, like drunk history. But you're
drunk history, but with esports broadcasting. That's gold ticket right there, dude.
Right there, Shift. There we go. It's called the Cast Factory instead of the Laugh Factory.
I love that. Oh my goodness, this is an idea. Take that to the bank right now. What the
heck? Hey man, it was great having you on the show though. I don't know if I know we've been at it for a little over an hour. Obviously, we could keep going. But
we really could keep going, but we won't put your audience through that.
Hey, hopefully your audience joins in as well, because you're here and we're talking Call of Duty, a little bit of a change. The podcast will be on the Console Pro News YouTube channel. We'll tweet it out on the Console Pro News Twitter. That's all one word. And also, if you're new to the podcast, you can catch our shows every episode, every Wednesday on Spotify. Console Corner on Spotify, not Console Pro News. A little confusing, but we tweet the links out. So just go to the Twitter. You'll see it. My name is Real Blue TV with no E in blue. IHOLDSHIFT. I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast, man. I've been wanting to do this episode with you for a while, but I feel like right now was perfect because we're 10 days away from the first week of the CDL.
You're right there, dude. It's happening. It's all happening.
Yeah. I'm excited for the season, man. I love Esports.
It's fun.
It's getting even better now. Been working on my casting too, so watch out.
Yeah, I saw you got that Rainbow Six thing going on. That's exciting, man. Good for you.
Oh, yeah. So with that, it was going to be a PC league, but only about 3 teams signed up. So I told them, hey, there's about 50 kids in my Discord asking me to do a R6 tournament for console. So why don't we just give them the opportunity? And I think we already have like 12 teams sign up. So
that's dope, dude. Good. That's awesome.
Yeah. And we're going to be doing that's for the league. It's like $35 entry fee, but we're going to have a couple, like for fun off, not part of the league, but just 1-day tournaments and stuff like that. I'll cast those. It's pretty rough casting that game, not because it's so boring.
I'm sure it's hard to. You have a duo for that? Because I feel like that's got to be a really tough game to solo cast.
It is very hard to solo cast. So if you're interested in learning that as well,
I literally have no idea anything Rainbow Six.
All right, so here's the thing, dude. Here's the thing. They're going into year 5. Okay, this game came out in 2015. Right.
Okay.
I bought it. I pre-ordered this game on my PS4 back in 2015 or 2014, whatever. And I got the game and I played it every day for like 12 hours a day. Kind of like how I play Paladins now. That's what I did with Rainbow Six. Right?
Okay.
But about midway through year 2, I found Paladins.
Got you. So you kind of like got split off from doing Rainbow Six stuff because Paladins took over your life?
Yes, but now that I'm getting back into it, I'm like, oh, I know this character. I know what he does. I know these 20 characters. Why is no one picking them? Oh, right. There's another 20 characters in the game now, and I don't know what any of these guys do. And like someone's running at me. I was playing the other day. Some dude is running at me with a motorcycle dirt bike helmet on, and his name's Mozzie. And he's like using his special ability, and it's making my screen all shaky and blurry and smoky. And I just fell on the ground, and now I can't crawl. And where'd my weapon go? Oh man, my PS4 just turned off. I'm like, what the hell is this dude doing to me? So
that's wild.
Yeah. But yeah, man, that game's pretty intense, like strategically wise. If you have some free time, just watch some of the Pro League stuff and listen to those casters, and you'll just sit there like, yo, what?
I remember watching one of the season finals when they had it.
Because they talk so strategically, because like it's a first person shooter, but it's like a I don't even know.
I know what you're trying to get at, because like there's the strategic like setup time, so like it's like a chess game shooter almost.
Yes,
like, way.
Yes. Both teams have 40 or 45 seconds to like set stuff up, and I'm just like, whoa, why is that guy doing that over there? He should be doing this over there. Why is he blocking that door? He should be blocking this door. And it's like, you know, each character has a special ability or equipment, and then, you know, it's like, oh, how many guys on the attacking team are going to bring breach charges? Oh, they've got 3 hard breachers in Habana, Thermite, and blah, blah, blah. And now there's bans in the game, and they're like, oh, are they going to ban the Thatcher? That's fine. What are they going to do now? And it's like, oh, well, you know, they banned Thatcher, so they're going to go heavy on the, like, defensive equipments, like Jaeger and shit. And I'm just like, oh, my God, dude, this gives my brain an aneurysm.
Yeah, my mind's already melting just listening to you talk about it, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah. And the worst part about casting this, right, is that with the lesser known teams or the teams that suck, I'm just going to flat out say suck, right? The teams that are crap at the game, it's not like any, if you had to cast a Call of Duty match shift that had two really bad teams.
Oh, I've been there, done that, dude.
Yeah, so have I. But how do you feel?
Like my brain is not even a structured thing, dude. First game I casted at CW Anaheim, 250-0 hardpoint, 6-0 search and destroy. How do you cast that?
Okay, I'll do you one better. I'm sitting here while they're setting up their defenses and the offense is driving drones around trying to find the stuff, right? So for 40 seconds, I'm sitting here saying, oh, blah, 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 blah. Round starts, it's over 30 seconds later. I'm just like, well, they suck, and they all just killed each other.
That's tough.
30 seconds of action, man. It's like...
That's tough.
My favorite part about casting this game, though, is that, like, I feel drunk while I'm doing it. Because they just... Everybody. You watch the Pro League, they do it the most. You know how you can lean left and right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they just like it looks like they're ducks just waddling their way through.
Constantly left, right.
Yeah, they don't stand up straight ever. It's like they just left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. So I just feel like I'm drunk while I'm casting this. That's what makes it enjoyable.
That's really funny, actually.
Yeah, because like after I watch and I'm casting this for about an hour, if I'm like, oh, okay, guys, it's break time. I gotta go to the bathroom. I feel like I still see the wobble in my vision while I'm walking to the restroom. And it's throwing me off, and I'm just like, oh, this is awesome. But yeah, so getting into some really Rainbow funny. Six. Trying to find some other stuff to cast too. I want to cast more Call of Duty. It's just not a lot of that going on outside of the official stuff.
Yeah, it's tough out there, dude. I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, but you got the CCL, though.
Yeah, dude, it's gonna be a fun year.
Yeah, see. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, dude. Anytime you want to jump me on talk COD, I'm always down for it.
Hey, man, I told you before, I'm starting a show. I'm actually getting, I think, a 2-man crew. Some people they go to school for broadcasting. And
dope.
And running the behind the scenes, the lower thirds, the scenes, stuff like that. I can't think of the word off the top of my head.
All of the actual the live stream production elements.
Yeah, the production. Yeah. So what they'll be doing? You watch Part in the Interruption, right?
I do watch Part in the Interruption.
That's my favorite sports show.
I love that show, dude. It's so good.
Michael Wilborn, Tony Kornheiser, hilarious, right? Michael Wilbon. So Wilborn. So I'll be doing a show similar to like that, but of course I'm by myself, so I don't have a co-host yet. They might have like one of their buddies as a caster. He might want to do it too, but we'll be talking just like how PTI is about all esports. We don't cover everything super in depth, but we talk about it enough to where people know what's happening.
Got you. That sounds dope.
Yeah, so it'll be similar to that format and how that show works, and we'll do it mainly like that. I'm thinking 30-minute episodes once a week. Might spread it out a little bit more if it's a little harsh at the beginning of the start, but in Sports Center and PTI, they bring in Barry Melrose to talk about hockey.
Absolutely.
For about 2 minutes.
I love me some Barry Melrose.
Yeah, see, you're a big hockey fan, so I knew you would understand.
I'm a big hockey fan.
I knew you would understand exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about the man of pure pleasure.
Love it, dude.
But they bring him on like a Skype call or whatever. Sometimes he's in the studio. He comes on for like 2 minutes. They talk. That's what I need you to do for Call of Duty, man.
Let's do it. I'm down for it.
I mean, I could talk Call of Duty, but you're the Barry Melrose.
Love me some Barry Melrose, man. I'm telling you, guy's a legend
of Call of Duty.
He
played, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he played I think he was a Canadian, if I'm not mistaken. I'm probably mistaken, as I'm frantically looking it up and trying not to sound like an idiot.
Well,
I'm still looking it up. Don't worry.
That's it for the show. We got to cut it before you get it right.
Tough scenes.
That way you're always wrong on the podcast.
Always wrong.
Yes.
I was completely wrong. He played for the Jets, the Maple Leafs, and the Red Wings. Feels bad.
Wow, 3 teams and you didn't get any of
None
those.
of them were the Canadians.
Yeah, 3 teams and none were the Canadians. I'm sure they had some Canadians on those teams, but not the Canadians.
True.
All right, man, that's about it. Thanks for coming on the show once again, man. I love you, dude.
Love you too, dude. Fun times.
Let me give you some of my energy through the mic.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I can feel it.
Yeah.